Masechet Sukkah, Daf 48. We have a few Mishnayot today about all the rest of the rituals that are associated with Sukkot. This Mishnah is elaborating on the opening of the Mishnah of the Perek, which detailed each of them and how many days we celebrate or commemorate each of these halachot. So the Mishnah at the top of the page says, Halel v'hasimcha Shemona. We say Hallel and we are rejoice all 8 days, all 7 days of Sukkot, and also Shemini Aseret. So this is the one holiday when we say Hallel Shalem, full Hallel every single day. Kesad melamed shechayav adam behalel b'simcha b'chavod yom tov acharon shel chag kishar kol yemot chag. So what does this mean? That a person is obligated in saying Hallel and in rejoicing and also in honoring the last day of Yom Tov, Shemini Aseret, just like the first. And don't think the last one is any less. This follows up on where we left off last time, that Shemini Aseret is Chag Bifnei Asmo. It's its own holiday and therefore deserves all of its own attention. And yet it also has Hallel and Simcha. When we say Simcha, that includes emotionally being happy, but it's hard to command someone to feel happiness. And so this also includes things that you would do to make you happy, especially bringing a korban shelamim. Shelamim is distinctive in that you bring the korban, but most of it you eat in Jerusalem with your family and friends, and you invite poor people. And so, you're having a barbecue. So who's not excited and joyous when there's a barbecue? I know who, only vegetarians, but everybody else is joyous. Even if they were in a bad mood, they'll become in a good mood. So though these mitzvot are chayav all 8 days, and the first and last included. Good. That's the Mishnah. And now we ask, what is the source that you have to be happy even on the 8th day? The Tanura Banan v'hayita ach sameach. So here's the Pesukim from Sefer Devarim 16, where we have the mitzvah of being happy is mentioned twice. First, in the Pasuk before 15, it says, V'samachta bechagecha, ta ubincha ubitecha, you all have to be happy. And this talking about on Sukkot. Not only the owner, but he has to make sure that everybody in this household will be happy. And then it continues the next pasuk 15. So 7 days. That's 7 days of Sukkot. And the pasuk ends v'hayita ach sameach, and be very happy. So we have a doubling. Why does it have to say again be happy? So literally we could say it opens and closes. It's a nice literary unit on the mitzvah to be joyous. But the doubling also tells us that it's including something else. So not only the 7 days, that I know from the first instance, but the second one comes to include the night of the last day of Yom Tov, meaning the night of Shemini Aseret. That would mean regarding a korban that I would have to bring a korban shelamim on the last day of Sukkot, what we call Hoshana Rabbah, so that I could eat it at night. We don't bring any korbanot at night. So you have to bring the shelamim during the day and then enjoy it that night, have a barbecue that night. Good. So that's how we learn it. But now we challenge that hypothesis. Wait a second. Maybe the words ach sameach are coming to, what are they coming to include? They're coming to include the first night of Sukkot. Why would you have to include that? Isn't that included within 7 days? No, it's not, because I only bring korban shalamim during the day. So therefore, once the holiday starts, I could bring shalamim during the day and celebrate it and eat it throughout all the days of Sukkot. But at the first night, I would think would be excluded from saying 7 days, because in order to have a korban shalamim the first night, I would have to bring it before Sukkot. And it doesn't say anything about doing something before Sukkot, just the 7 days. And so therefore, I might think that the words ach sameach is not coming to include Shemini Aseret, but rather coming to teach me that I should bring a korban shalamim before Sukkot starts so that I can enjoy it on that night. So, Keshu Omer, ach chilek. Therefore, the word ach is a limiting word. The word sameach is a doubled, is extra. That comes to include something. Ach comes to exclude something. What is it excluding? Oh, not all of the 7 days, meaning you don't have to include the first night. That's what it's excluding. And since it's excluding that, the word sameach will include the last day. So now the Midrash asks an obvious question. Well, why'd you choose one over the other? Why'd you choose to include Shemini Aseret night and exclude the first night? Why not switch it around and say Sameach is coming to include the first night and Ach is coming to exclude the last night? The answer is Marbe ani leile yom tov hacharon sheyesh simcha lefanav. The answer is I want to include Shemini Aseret because it has a mitzvah of simcha right before. So once you're already in the mode of being joyous, you want to continue it. It would be a kind of a letdown to be happy and have all that barbecue for 7 days, and then Shemini Aseret, oh, that's it, no more. So it makes sense once you have momentum to continue it into the 8th day, more than having to start off the first night. There was no simcha beforehand, and therefore there's no momentum that would need to build up to it. And so that is where we learn that you have to have simcha all 8 days, not only 7. Good. Next Mishnah. Sukkah shiv'ah kesad gamar melechol lo yatir et sukkato aval morid et hakelim min hamincha ulema'la mipnei kebod yom tov hacharon shel hag. So Sukkah you have only for 7 days. Shemini Aseret in Israel, they don't sit in the Sukkah at all. So now the Mishnah is giving details. How exactly do you accomplish that transition from eating in the Sukkah to eating inside? And the answer is once you finish eating your main meal, your lunchtime meal on the 7th, don't break down the Sukkah. You're not allowed to break down the Sukkah because the mitzvah still applies. And so who knows, you might need it. Maybe you're going to take a nap. Maybe you're going to want to eat something more later on. And so that you built the Sukkah, it's still set aside for its mitzvah. So you can't break it. But here's what you can and should do is all the vessels that you put in the Sukkah during the week. You're supposed to take all your fine ware and furniture and silverware, everything, bring it out to the Sukkah because you're living there and making it nice. So after you finish lunch on the 7th day, then bring that inside and in the afternoon, after the time of Mincha. In other words, like 2.5 hours before sunset, because you want to honor the incoming holiday of Shemini Aseret, and you want to have all your fine ware in your house, in your dining room, so that you can enjoy the holiday. So on the one hand, we don't want to insult the Sukkah too early. On the other hand, so we don't break it down. On the other hand, we do want to honor the incoming holiday, and so that would be the transition point. Good. Now the Gemara gives more details. En lo kelim lehorid mahu. What if you don't have any vessels to bring inside? You didn't have any vessels there in the first place. Then how will you show that you're making the transition? Okay, this is a strange question. En lo kelim? What do you mean you don't have vessels? Ela ki ishtamash b'ma yishtamash. What did you use when you ate in the Sukkah? You were sitting there and eating for 7 days. You ate with your hands? You sat on the floor? Ela en lo makom lehorid kelamahu. We mean that you have no place inside to move all your stuff. Maybe you got, special furniture just for the Sukkah that you put in storage during the year. So there's you don't have any room to move it into your house, right? So you have other things. And so now you can't make that transition. And it would seem that associated with this is, what if you actually need to eat in the Sukkah during Shemini, on Shemini Aseret? In other words, you have nowhere to go. Maybe you came to Jerusalem and you live far away and you built a Sukkah and you don't have a house that you're transitioning to and you're just camping out there for the entire holiday. So then what would you do if you can't move your vessels from the Sukkah anywhere and you need to eat in the Sukkah? Rabbi Chaya, this should say Rav Chaya bar Asher. Printed edition is not correct. All the manuscripts say Rav Chaya bar Asher, who was from Babel. Amar potech ba arba, pochet ba arba'a. Here's what you do in the afternoon of the 7th. Then you dismantle a little bit of the schach, 4 tefachim, just enough to make a hole in the roof that would make it pasul. And that shows I'm not using this hut as a sukkah anymore for a mitzvah, but rather I'm just using it as a hut, as a tent. And so therefore I can use it. I'm showing that I'm now transitioning out of Sukkot and using this for Shemini Aseret. That's one way to do it. But Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yoshua is a first generation Amorah from Eretz Yisrael. He says, Madlik bayat haner. All you have to do is light a lamp in the Sukkah. The idea is that when the lamp goes out, it's very smelly and disgusting after you're all finished with it. And that would be disgraceful to leave it in a sukkah. We saw this much earlier, especially if it's a small sukkah, it's really going to smell up the place. And so when during the 7 days of Sukkot, you're not allowed to have a disgusting lamp inside a small sukkah. So his suggestion is, on Shemini Aseret, purposely leave a disgusting lamp in there, and that shows that you are disgracing the space and not treating it as a Sukkot mitzvah, and then that will be a second way that you will be allowed to do it. Now, the Gemara notes, they're not arguing with each other. Each would agree that the other solution is fine, but they nevertheless require both. They do suggest both of them, because one of them is for us who live in Bavel. In Bavel, we can't take down the sukkah. We can't make a hole in the roof for tevachim, because we still need it. We actually need to sit in the sukkah on the 8th day, and only on the 9th day we're asking this question: what would we do on the 9th day on Simchat Torah if you wanted to sit in the sukkah and you didn't have anywhere else to go? So then you wouldn't be able to do the first solution. You'd have to use the Yoshua ben Levi solution, that you put a lamp in it. The other solution is for them that live in Eretz Yisrael, since they don't need the sukkah anymore. By the end of the 7th day, they can make a hole in the roof for tefachim. We wouldn't be able to do that outside of Eretz Yisrael, because you can't build or deconstruct anything on Yom Tov, but you can do it on Chol Moed, just a little bit, for this purpose. Okay, this is very curious, because Rav Chia bar Asher, who says take it down, he is from Bavel, and so he's giving the solution that would work for Eretz Yisrael. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, who is from Eretz Yisrael, Amora, he's giving the solution that would work in Bavel. Okay, truth is that solution would work anywhere, right? But it's still curious that they're switched. Okay, Ha-tenach sukkah ketana, sukkah gedola ma'iga lemeimar. The lamp solution is good for a small sukkah. We'll be discussing. If it's a large sukkah, then it's not a problem. Even on Sukkot, you could leave a little lamp on the other side. It's not that smelly. So then what would you do as a solution? And let's say you're in Bavel and you can't make a hole in the sukkah. So another solution is to bring in eating vessels. You bring in dirty plates and pots and pans in the sukkah, and that shows I'm not treating it in an honorable way, that way that you're supposed to. So during Sukkot, you should not do that. And so by bringing those in on Shemini Aseret, I'm showing that I'm not using it anymore for a sukkah, and that makes the transition. On Sukkot itself, the food vessels you should keep out of the sukkah, whereas drinking vessels, keep them in the sukkah. Drinking vessels don't get dirty. You could just keep using them the whole time in the sukkah, so those are fine. So since the food vessels you should keep out of the sukkah during Sukkot, so that is equally useful on Shemini Aseret to purposely bring them in. And this is a practical halacha that I mentioned one time, that nowadays, if you, it's nice out and you have a company over and you don't have enough room in your house and you want to use the Sukkah Simchat Torah, you could bring some cooking pots and put them in the sukkah, and everybody will ask you why they're cooking pots in the sukkah, and then you can explain to them this halacha, and then it is permitted. Good. Nisuch hamayim kesad. So the ritual of pouring the water onto the mizbeach, how is it done? Here are the details. Selochit shel zahav. We take a jug made out of gold. Mechazeket shelosha lugim. It holds 3 log. Haya memale min hashiloach. And you go and would fill it up from the Siloam pool in Jerusalem, outside the temple area. Just a little bit outside. And so this would be done in a big procession with a lot of celebration. And so they would carry, someone, didn't have to be a Kohen, anyone could carry this jug of water to the water gate, Shad Hamayim. So this is one of the gates into the temple courtyard. This is a log, by the way. When we say a revi'it, the size of a kiddush cup, that means it's a quarter of a log. So that would be a log. So you bring 3 of these, and you come into the Shad Hamayim, which is here on the south side of the Temple Mount. So that's the original Watergate. The Watergate Hotel in Washington is named after this. The Watergate here is also famous in the book of Nehemiah. That's where they read the Torah in front of all the people. By the way, the Watergate Hotel in Washington is also called that because there was actually a canal and a dam there. So there was a gate for the water. But I'm not sure if the people that named the Watergate Hotel had in mind the biblical reference. I think they did, but I tried to find the proof for that, and I couldn't find any source for it. So the Sadiq Iyun on that account. All right, so they brought it in, and they would blow trumpets, a long blow, and then staccato, and then another long one. As we always blow shofar, similarly, they blew the trumpets. And again, this is to add to the celebration and to the publicity of it. Why would they make this so public? The answer is because of the Sadducees, who said that we don't do the pouring of the water on the Mizbeach. It's not mentioned in the Torah, and they were against it. So therefore, the rabbis and the Pharisees before them, in order to show that we do this, we're not going to do it in hiding. We're going to do it in full public procession in order to publicize this mitzvah. Allah bakevesh ufanali smolo. So then they bring it into the they bring it to the mizbeach, and they go up the ramp of the mizbeach and turn left. Usually you turn right and go counterclockwise. In this case, you turn left because there were two basins on the left side on that corner, right when you go up the ramp. And that's where it was done. So there's no need to go all the way around when you can just make a left and go right to that corner. And sheneh sifalim shel kesef hayusham. So there were 2 silver basins. Here is a depiction of what that silver basin might have looked like. And so they see that there's a hole or on the bottom where so they would pour in the water here, it would collect, and then it would pour out slowly onto the top of the mizbeach. Good. This is a Bar Kochva coin. Really interesting coin. Looks like it says Lecherut Yerushalayim, for the redemption of Jerusalem, for the freedom of Jerusalem. And on it, you see a willow branch here. So it's probably some dulav. And this is a jug. And very likely, this is a depiction of the jug of water that was actually used. So this is really amazing to see. Of course, Bar Kochva is after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, so he wasn't doing it, but he was. The people there remembered a time when they did do it, and were hoping to rebuild and do it again. Okay, so now the Yehuda Omer shel sid hayu, the basins that they poured it into were not made out of silver, according to the Yehuda, but rather out of limestone. Ela shayu mushcharin pnehem mipnei hayayin, but they look like silver. Limestone by itself is white, but because they poured wine into it, we're going to see there were 2, one for wine, one for water. Because the one that there was poured wine into it, the wine stained it, so that in the end it had a silvery color. So that's why they call them silver, but really it was only really only made out of limestone. Umenukavin, and they had a hole at the base. Kemin sheneh hotamot dakin, like 2 nose-like protrusions, like 2 nostrils coming out. It's a funny imagery to describe these 2 basins and the holes in them like 2 nostrils, almost like you're seeing a face. So we're anthropomorphizing them, maybe as a way of thinking about when you come, lera'ot et penei Hashem, you're coming to see the face of God. So this is kind of a little bit of a depiction. I'm not sure, but it's interesting to describe it in such a way. Ve'echad me'obeh, ve'echad dak. One of them was wide, and one of them was thin. Kedesh yushenehem kalin bebat achat. I was going to explain that wine is thicker, so that had to have a wider spout, and the one that held the water had a thinner one because water flows more quickly. And so that way, when they poured the water into one and wine in the other, they poured them at the same time, and they would empty out at the exact same time but the spouts needed to be adjusted so that they would empty out at the same rate. Madavo shel mayim, mizracho shel yain. The one on the west was for the water. The one on the east was for wine. The one on the west, that means that was farther away from the ramp. We can look at a picture here. So you go up the ramp, and it would be poured on this corner here. This is the corner that's closer to the Kodesh Kodashim. And so there's no reason to make a right and go all the way around when you just make a left right here. So here's a close-up of this corner. Here's the corner, and here is the one for wine. So when you go up the ramp here, you'd get to the one with wine. Wine libations were done all the time, every day. And so that would be first. And the one for water was only used on Sukkot Shemini Aseret, and that was farther away. So that was further west here. And they had two spouts, and then the spouts would empty out into a drain in the Mizbeach itself and go down underneath. Good. Era shel mayim letoch shel yayin, v'shel yayin letoch shel mayim yasa. If by mistake they put the water into the wine basin or the wine into the water basin, and they still fulfilled their mitzvah, and that would be okay. Good. The Gemara is going to use this to explain why they were both called silver, according to the Biudah, even though it was made out of limestone, because sometimes by mistake you put the wine into the water one. So once in a while that got stained and got that silvery polish too. Okay, let me pause here for a second to point out a literary connection from Professor Avi Wolfish, who wrote about this, and that this Perek here is talking about the ritual of Nisuch HaMayim, talking about how there was a mixture of wine and water. This we had also previously in the second Perek, when we said if it rains on Sukkot, then what is that like? It's like a servant that comes before a master to mix the wine with water. And then the master takes the water and pours it out on his face. So there's again a mixture of, even though over here it's a mistake, and so kind of like a servant, a kohen doing something, the wrong thing, and still he fulfilled his mitzvah, but it was not the correct way to do it. So it's interesting that there's a similarity here. Okay, hold on to that. I'm gonna bring it up again at the end of this paragraph. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, belog haya menasech kol shemona. Rabbi Yehuda says that that jug of water was not 3 lugim, but rather only 1. And it was done all 8 days, not only 7 days. So he argues on 2 points, right? The Tanakh Kama would say that Nisuch HaMayim was done only 7 days. Ve'lemenasech omer lo hagba yadecha. שפעם אחת ניסח אחד על גבי רגליו, ולגמוהו כל העם באתרוגיהן. And this is now back to Tanakh Kama, to the Kohen who's performing the water libation, we will tell him to raise his hands up so that when he had that jug, everybody could see it. Everybody in the courtyard should be able to see it as he's pouring it. Why? Because one time there was a Kohen Gadol who was a Sadducee, and he wanted to skip the Nisuch HaMayim. And so instead of pouring it into the basins on the Mizbeach, he poured it onto his feet, which is desecration of it. And the people there saw that happening, and the majority of the people followed the Pharisees, and they got really upset, and they happened to be holding their etrogim, because it was Sukkot. And so they had ready-made weapons, missiles, and they pelted the Kohen Gadol with etrogim. And so because of that, from then that day on, we tell the Kohen, just in case we suspect him of not following the right thing, we want to all see that you do it correctly. So this is an interesting story. It's just a one-liner here, but we know the details of the story also from Josephus. In Antiquities, he talks about Alexander Yanai, who was quite an evil Hasmonean king, and his own people were seditious against him. For at the festival, which was then celebrated, when he stood upon the altar and was going to sacrifice, nation rose upon him and pelted him with citrons, which they had in their hands, because the laws of the Jews required that at the Feast of Tabernacles, at Sukkot, everyone should have branches of the palm tree and citron tree. Josephus is explaining to his Roman audience why they're all holding citrons. And they also reviled him as derived from a captive, and so unworthy of his dignity and sacrificing. At this, he was enraged and slew about 6,000 of them. So Alexander Yanai, he got pelted. He didn't take the sitting down. He went and killed 6,000 people, Jews, and started a whole civil war. He crucified Pharisees, and this incident caused all kinds of problems. So Josephus gives us a lot more detail. But here the Gemara is bringing it because now we get the understanding of a different detail of it, which is the halachic disagreement about nisuch hamayim. Okay, so this now relates to what I said before from Professor Avi Wolfish, that you have the mixing of water and wine and also the pouring on the floor. So just like the disgruntled master in the Mashal in chapter 2 takes the water and pours it in the slave's face, so to this Sadducean Kohen takes the water and pours it on the floor instead of in the proper place. So both of them are about proper and improper rituals. Rain is good after the holiday. We pray for rain, but on the first night is a bad sign. So you got to make sure to get it in the right place. So this is just a nice literary connection, even between two chapters that are actually about very different subject matters. Okay, so that's really cool. Now, the Mishnah continues and says, "K'ma'asehu bechol, kach ma'asehu ba'Shabbat, ela shehaya memale me'erev Shabbat havit shel zahav she'ena ha'mekudeshet min hashilawach u'manicha ba'lishka." Now, if any of the days of Sukkot happen to be Shabbat, then we're not going to go out and carry the water on Shabbat. So instead, we just fill up that jug on Friday, and we bring it and we use a chavit, a jug that was not consecrated. The reason is because if you put anything into a consecrated jug, then the contents becomes consecrated also. And there's a law that you're not allowed to keep consecrated water overnight. If it stays overnight, you can't use it anymore. So therefore, we use an unconsecrated jug, and that way we don't have to worry about it staying overnight, over Shabbat. And we get it from the same place, and we leave it in one of the chambers, and then we'll use it the next day. Now, if it should spill, here's another reference to the spilling of the water, or if it was uncovered, then we can't use it anymore. So we use the regular source of water in the Bet HaMikdash, which is the kiyod that the Kohanim would wash their hands and their feet with. Because wine and water that are open, you cannot use on Mizbeach. That's another halacha. You can't drink it either, but maybe a snake put their venom in it. But if it's uncovered, you also can't use it for the Mizbeach. So therefore, they would just use the water from the kiyod. Now, this is interesting because it shows us that really they didn't have to get water from the Meh HaShiloach. They could have used the water that's right there on the Temple Mount from the kiyod, and you could do that any day. So why did they go all the way out there? Again, the reason is to add to the pomp and circumstance, to the publicity of this mitzvah. First, because they love the mitzvah and it's fun, and also to put it in the face of the Sadducees that they disagree, and so they make sure to teach everyone the importance of this mitzvah. Good. Now, Gemara asks, what is the source that you should draw water with such happiness? So you should draw water with joy from the springs of salvation. You see that there's a connection between these waters and Geulah as well. And so that's how we learn it should be done with joy. Good. Now we're going to have two stories that are really interesting and kind of enigmatic. Hanhu tere mineh. There was two heretics. Had shemeh Sason v'chad shemeh Simcha. One of them was named Mr. Sasson, another one Mr. Happy. Okay, so are these real people, or are they? Is this an allegory? So far, it kind of looks like an allegory, but who knows? Maybe there was a guy named Sasson. Anyway, there were Amar le Sasson l'Simcha, Ana adifa minach. Sasson says, I'm better than you, Simcha. Dichtiv Sasson v'Simcha yasigu. You see in this pasuk from Yeshaya, Sasson is mentioned first and only then Simcha. See, I'm better. Amar le Simcha le Sasson Simcha says back to him, Ana difa menach tichtiv simcha v'sason laYehudim, because another pasuk in Megillat Esther says simcha first and then sason. Okay, so they're arguing about who's better. Amar le sason simcha had yoma shebakuch v'shavyuch parvanka. He says, listen, one day they're going to dismiss you, Simcha, and they're going to make you into just a messenger. Tichtiv ki b'simcha teseu. As the pasuk says, with Simcha, using Simcha, you will go out. When you have to go out and send a message somewhere, you're going to take Simcha. He's going to lose his high status and just become a lowly messenger. Amar le Simcha le sason chad yoma shebakuch umilu bach maya. And instead, Simcha says to Sason, one day you're going to be dismissed and you're going to be used like a bucket to fill with water. As it says, you will draw water with Sason. Okay, so now this is the same pasuk here, so that's why we're bringing it. Now this is very curious. What is the meaning of this dialogue here? So it seems that when it talks about heretics, we do know that the Dead Sea sect and Sadducees and Christians also, they had a particular way of interpreting scripture called pesher, in which they would take pisukim and take various people, words, and images as not just symbols, but as actual references to modern day, to the things that are happening in their own day. Unlike the rabbis who say, of course, the Nevi'im are talking about Geulah in general for the future, but they thought that these particular references are actually talking about this person or that person. This guy is Mashiach, this guy is going to be, do this and that. And so this, in a way, this Agadah is in a way making fun of them, as if the words Sason and Simcha and this Pesukim are referring to particular people. So this looks like a parody of Christian and other heretical types of biblical interpretation. There might also be something, there's one commentary that says, what's the difference between Sason and Simcha? Simcha is inner joy, Sason is outer trappings of joy. So the machloket here is, which comes first? Do you feel joy inside Simcha? And when you feel it, then you're going to go dance and make a barbecue? Or do the opposite? First, you do the things, you smile and you have a big meal and you do those things and then you internalize it. Okay, that's more of an allegory upon an allegory. I think the first one about a parody is really interesting and seems to be what they're getting at. But now we have another one. So now this mean named Mr. Sason, he speaks to Rabbi Abhu. Rabbi Abhu is known to have conflict with heretics and reject their claims. Here it would seem that Sason is actually speaking to him, so maybe Sason was a real person, or maybe this also is said in a mocking way, as an allegorical way. Anyway, he says, Atiditu dit malui limayim le'alma de'ates. So the heretic says, in the world to come, when you have resurrection of the dead, you people, you Jews, you're all going to draw water for me and serve me. You will draw water for me, Sason. Rabbi Abu says, you would be right if it had a lamed there, that we would be draw water for Sason. But it doesn't say that, it says with Sason. Using Sason. What it actually means is that we're going to be using your skin and make a jug out of your own corpse. And we're going to use you in order to draw water. You're going to be the bucket. You're not the person that we are going to be serving. Okay, so what might be at stake here is a discussion about Techiyat HaMetim. The heretics are kind of mocking Techiyat HaMetim and saying, if he doesn't believe in it at all, but he's saying, if you do believe it, you're going to be serving me. You're going to see I'm right. And they saying, we're going to be resurrected. You won't. Your skin is just going to be, dead and something that we can use. Okay, so these are probably a lot deeper. A lot of people think that Agadah is easier than Halacha, but what you see in cases like this is this Agadah certainly is very deep in making references, the full extent to which would require a lot of research. Okay, but now back to the halacha. Allah ba kevesh ufana lismol tenor banan kol haolim lemizbeach olim derech yamin umakifin v'yodin derech semol. To elaborate on the way that people use the ramp, most of the time someone goes up the ramp and he would make a right and then he would go around counterclockwise. However, except for three cases, that they go up when they get up, they turn left, and they don't go all the way around. They just do what they have to do on that corner, and then turn back and come back down also on the left side. So those two, because that's where the basins are, right on that corner, for the water and for the wine. And also, when you have a lot of sacrifices of birds, and there's too many people on the east. So usually the olot made out of birds are done on the east part of the Mizbeach. In other words, here, that would be convenient because part of it you have to throw down into the pile of ashes that was below. But if there were too many people there and it got overcrowded, then you could do it on this corner. So again, this is another thing that's done on that corner, and that would be why you just simply go up there. Good. Here it says that they, according to the Yehuda, the basins were not made out of silver, but out of limestone. And they just looked like silver because when wine went on the limestone, it stained it and became silvery. So Bishlam at the Yain Mashchir, the Maya Amay Mashchir. You understand the basin for wine, every day it had wine poured into it. That's why it got stained. But the one for water only gets water in it. So why would it ever look like stained? Why would you call it silver? Since we mentioned that sometimes they would make a mistake. And if you put the water into the wine basin or the wine into the water basin, you fulfilled. So even if they didn't do that often, once in a while they did that. And therefore, it did get stained as well. Next, and the basins looked like they had on the bottom. They had two spouts that looked like noses protruding. It would seem that the Mishnah follows the Yehuda. According to the Banan, you have 3 lugim of wine and 3 lugim also of water. And therefore, since they're 3 and 3, why would you need one of the spouts to be thick and one to be thin? You can make them exactly the same. And since they're exactly the same amount of wine and water, then they would leave the same way. So therefore, the Mishnah that says that there was one thick and one thin spout must follow the Yehuda, who says that there's only 1 log of water, and so then that's why you need the water to be a lot thinner than the wine, which has 3 lugim. So are we saying that even the anonymous part of the Mishnah is the Yehuda? We say no. You could even say it is Rabbanan because wine is thicker and therefore flows more slowly. Again, it was probably also not very filtered. It had little pieces in it. And so therefore that has to be thicker. Even though it's 3 lugim of each, you need a little bit of a wider spout in order for them to empty out at the same time. And this answer that we said, we have further evidence for it. If it was a Yehuda, you wouldn't just say thin and thick. You would have to say something more than that, wide and narrow, because if one has to be 3 times the amount of the other. It's not just a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner. It has to be 3 times as big. So you'd have to use words that express a bigger contrast. The Tanya de Yehuda Omer shene kasvaot hayusham echad shamayim ve'echad shel yayin. He says there were 2 pipes. One for water, one for wine. Yayin piha rachab, shamayim piha kasad, and he uses the words wide and narrow, more contrastive words than the others. So in fact, when the Yehuda is speaking for himself in this braita, he does use different language, and the fact that our Mishnah does not use such language that contrasts wide and thin, it shows that the anonymous portion of the Mishnah is in fact not the Yehuda, but it's still required to have bigger and little for the thickness of the wine. And last line, Ma'aravo shel mayim. The basin all the way to the west was for water because it was farther away, and you don't use it as often. So now another baraita that elaborates a little bit more on the story of Alexander Yanai. So this Sadducee, he poured it on his feet. You see, there were probably a lot of Sadducean Kohanim Gedolim, but most of them followed the Pharisaic way anyway, because the masses of the people were Pharisees and they didn't want to get in trouble. But Alexander Yanai, he didn't care about starting a fight. Which he did successfully. And they pelted him. And now we have another part of the story that because they were throwing things, maybe some people threw rocks also. And what happened is they chipped the corner of the Mizbeach. The keren is the top of it, of the Mizbeach up here. Right, the keren up here. So they chipped it. And this is not good because it has to be full. So they couldn't fix it completely right away. And so at least temporarily, they made a patch. They put salt and they covered it up with salt. So that way it was smooth and not chipped. And not that makes it kosher, because it has to be, all a solid piece, but at least it won't look damaged. So just for cosmetic reasons, they temporarily patched it up with salt. Because we have a general rule that if you have the mizbeach, but it's lacking a ramp, or it doesn't have the horns, or it doesn't have the base, or is not square, if it's missing any of these things, then you can't use it. The Bioseh says even the sovev, even the ledge around it, where the kohen would walk, that also is a requirement for the validity of the mizbeach. And so therefore, since the keren was broken, it was no longer eligible. So I think the story shows the extent of the conflict about this ritual, which maybe seems like a small thing, but it was a very, very big deal, a central locus of a controversy between the sectarians. And ultimately, we say the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam. Here, physically, the Mizbeach was literally broken because of this dispute. And but hopefully the Nisuch HaMayim is meant to be a prayer for the future Geula, and so hopefully we can see that Geula without that Sinat Chinam and infighting that they had back during the times of the second Beit HaMikdash. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen ve'amen.